Save streaming. I'm going to review the articles today about data structures, starting with arrays. I also did 10, actually 4 different articles of consensus algorithms for the blockchain because I want to have at least some of them in the blockchain as I build the programming ones. And I'm also going to delete the ones that I have for the other categories as well because I put them there just as a filler to test things out. So this one in economics, delete this. And then I'm gonna pass them from this project here to the other one. This one is the one that I'm using to put the resources for the articles. Here's the data structure. This one I already read, and I think that it looks fine. I'm still not sure about if the way that I'm doing things is the best way or just a waste of time. Like what I'm thinking now in my mind is to just put as many articles as I can about the basic stuff so I cover a lot of different things. And then only after that I write more original articles that are gonna be, that I'm actually gonna have to research more because they're gonna be a combination of different things. But I don't know if the return on investment on building these articles is good or not, or just a waste of time and I should focus on the other ones before. But the only reason why I'm doing those ones is because I think that, like, if I just do the ones that are more original and I have to do research and they're gonna be more unique because there's a higher chance for them to rank, I think, because it's unique input, then like there's a less chance, even if I get a bunch of views from them, there's a less chance that people are gonna read other articles on the website and that they're gonna continue visiting. So that's the reason why I'm thinking I'm doing this the way that, but I'm not really sure if it's the best strategy or not. And my concern is that I make all of these articles and then I got penalized, and then like after getting penalized you can't really, you have to start over again and you can't really change the articles later because it's something that is hard to come back. That's what I'm thinking about, because then obviously it's gonna be a waste of time if I build the other articles then on top of these ones. Ideally, I would be getting a couple of thousand views a month, I think, before I start thinking about building or improving the website in other ways, like putting the search bar and then creating putting the login information instead of a subscription, and then creating more stuff around it. And thinking about different ways that I can monetize that are going to be more effective than affiliate marketing or ads. Actually, let me search the meaning, but I'm gonna put continuous there. thinking about what kind of way I can write this. I think this is fine, but then here, once I starting contiguous memory locations, I think maybe adjacent. I think this is fine. I'm gonna leave it like this. Do I change anything just because it sounds that? It's only 35%. Maybe has. Let's see now. When the information is accurate, it's really hard to decide if I should change things or not, because of the whole penalization thing. Like, the concern is that you're putting all this effort manually when someone else can just spam a bunch of things and then they can outrank you because they don't need to be concerned. They can retroactively change the text later and create just a bunch of different sites. And then it's kind of dumb for me to manually review them, because then this other person, hypothetical person that just doing just putting it straight away, then like they would be, it would be a much smarter strategy. But then the problem is that if I take all this time to do this manually and then I get penalized, then it's kind of dumb too. Because I'm actually putting the work in to review. So that's the concern that I have, and I'm not really sure if it's a waste of time or not. Because obviously I could create a bunch of different sites, even if I wanted to do off stream and not tell anyone. I could just build a bunch of different sites and spam. And obviously I have the skills to do that, like to build tools, especially using ChatGPT, that would allow me to build a bunch of different sites fast. But obviously I don't want to do that because I don't want to put a bunch of information out there that I'm not really sure if it's correct or not. And it is kind of a scammy thing to do, I think. But then at the same time, like, if I take all the risk of putting all this work and then I get penalized, I'm kind of fucked, because I could have saved all of this time just copying and not reviewing at all. So this is why I'm debating whether or not to change the stacks and to play more like this game of trying to just change enough so that it doesn't get detected as AI content. As obviously I'm reviewing to make sure that everything is correct. And writing completely on my own also feels dumb, because it's the same point, like there's no difference. Because if I write everything on my own, it can still get flagged, or I can be a lot slower than someone else that is not gonna do that. But I'm not sure if that is the best strategy long term. Like writing less articles, but then writing everything originally. It's hard to decide because obviously the system is not fair, so like there's no way to know what's gonna happen. Especially when people start creating deep fakes and deep videos, and which is already happening right now. Like there's a lot of YouTube channels that use text-to-speech, and the text-to-speech is getting better and better until it's unrecognizable. It's the whole automation channel type of thing. And the issue with that is that then every channel becomes the same, and it's kind of because everyone's doing for money. And then it becomes a vicious cycle because the recommendation systems are also done by AI. So you're like feeding the new AI with the data from the previous AI, because everyone is using AI to create the content. Then that content is fed into the machine learning models again, and creates the vicious loop where nobody knows what's true anymore. And the echo chambers just becomes exponentially more worse, because everyone's gonna live on their own bubble, because that's the natural tendency of your limbic system, to avoid risk and minimize energy. And the hardware of human beings is designed to work at 150 people maximum, I think. That's why we are tribal. So because it gets spawned out of this, then, and I think that's the reason and the best that I'm doing here. I think that the system is not sustainable if it stays like this. I don't think that ChatGPT is gonna kill Google, because it's like you're just talking with one person. Even if that person has all the data from the internet, it is not the same thing, because they're gonna still have biases. Like, unless it's the whole stuff that I talked about before, where it has so much data that it doesn't matter, because their biases are integrated with everything. Then I can see that, but then that's the issue, because it leaves people, including myself and everyone else, without a way to build a business or to do anything, because then AI dominates everything. Like how are you gonna gain traffic or build something if everyone, like the only option you have is should be the one creating the AI and creating the systems. But then even if you are on that portion of the equation, still very few people. So most people, like what are most people gonna do? And they are not gonna have money as well to buy for things because they're gonna be unemployed because AI takes everything. This is the thing that it doesn't make sense. I can see in the near future that instead of being Google, it's gonna be several different AI agents, and they are gonna they're gonna work like ChatGPT. There's gonna be language models, but it's still the same problem because I can't see any other path to go. Like in my position, like what do you do? There's nothing you can do about it. Because from those language models you can't, like there's no way to make money unless you're the one using the language models to build something. But even if you're in that position, then you still need the traffic to build it, because otherwise nobody's gonna know, and the barrier to entry to create the tools is gonna be lower and lower, so it's like a race to the bottom. So the only currency is attention, again, because the only way to test MVPs and do everything else is to gain traffic. But you can only gain traffic if you can build something to gain attention, build content, but then the content is dominated by the AI. So the only other alternative is to use AI to create content, but then if you get flagged, then you're also fucked. That's the problem. And I guess that even if you use AI to create content, then it still doesn't work because there's gonna be a monopoly of the platforms of content creation, let's say, because it follows a Pareto distribution. So the largest YouTubers and everything like that is gonna be deepfakes that are designed to appeal to specific niches, and then there's gonna be platforms that create a bunch of different deepfakes, and those platforms are the ones that are gonna dominate everything. Obviously, I don't want to try to build something like that because I think that it just accelerates the process of self-destruction, because it's a vicious cycle. And even if it isn't a vicious cycle because of the amount of data allows it to be sustainable, it still doesn't work because the market economy breaks down. Like there's no reason anymore for certain people to do certain things because it's all AI. It's hard to decide what to do. And the only alternative that I could think about, and that I've been trying to do for a long time, but it's extremely hard to do, which is to create something on the blockchain. That's the only way that I can see that this doesn't fuck everyone over. But the issue of that is that you have to find a consensus algorithm that integrates life itself, the balance of life, of all life forms, so that it doesn't become an exponential distribution over time because of lack of the force of the power of regulation to coordinate and regulate. And then the only way that that's gonna work as well is if you find a way to embed that into the hardware so that the infrastructure is aware of itself and becomes like a body. And the body is in alignment with the overall principles, fundamental principles of life. Because then the AI agents that are gonna exist on the blockchain, because they're interacting with each other in this base layer of the consensus protocol that is like a body, then you can reach harmony because it's not fully competitive and it's not fully collaborative, let's say. Like it's the same way that the body has a bunch of different functions and every organ is different, but together they work in harmony to make the body. So the reason why I haven't done or started this yet is because of this. It's just extremely complex. You have to understand how the body works and how the principles of physics that make up life work, and then create a consensus protocol that embeds all of these structures into hash functions. And then you have to take into consideration the problem of the NP hard thing, where whether or not it's gonna be computationally reducible or not, if the boundary of computation exists and it's gonna be held true a long time, so that the encryption mechanisms you use to create a data structure that is gonna contain the consensus mechanism is not breakable in the future by the AI models. I guess it does. It's very similar to the movie The Matrix, actually, because everyone's already being paid for their data, and what creates the power of the machine learning model is the data. So that might be a future as well, which it's already happening in a way. But then how do you design something that is not dystopian based on that? I think actually there is no dystopian and utopian because it's a symmetry again, but yeah, the balance, how do you reach balance? I'm not familiar with Java, but I think it's correct there. So here seems like it's correct. Oh, it's different. Oh no, this is C++. I think this is correct. This is correct also. I think that might be JavaScript. This code's here. Oh no, can't be JavaScript, so that should be C++. I'm not sure if it's correct because I'm just gonna put size off or put lat and then say that it's JavaScript. I'm just gonna use this one. Better. Good. Okay, I'm gonna remove that thing. In addition to one-dimensional arrays, many programming languages are also support multi-dimensional. Do they have to have the same length? I think yes. The length can vary, but the length of all of them has to be the same. So that it is a matrix. Still thinking in my mind about the whole thing of AI content creation. How that's gonna affect everything. So whether or not it's worth it to create things just with AI. Because you know that this is unstoppable, so but I think that it is not worth it. And the challenge is to think about something that allows something you can create that increases the chance of the system not collapsing, I think. But everything that I can think involves a lot of complexity. Maybe we could create a different form of... If you created the platform for content creation, but then you made it as a decentralized exchange or decentralized autonomous organization, where everyone gets rewarded for the computation that AI does. I think that would be very interesting, actually. But how would you do that? Because the problem with that is that how do you stop it from being gamified? The same way that it is happening now, where people will just produce AI content at scale, and then it becomes a vicious cycle again, because that's the Nash equilibrium of that system. Yeah, the challenge is the guidelines, like how do you parse? That's the thing here, I think, that it comes down to, at the bottom, is distinguishing truth from lie. How to create a structure, and then it gets too complex because it gets to the whole fractal thing, where truths are always relative, and then the geometry of the information structure dictates what's true and what's not, because it's always relative to the observer. So the only way to create a rule set that allows the game to not becomes a vicious cycle is to embed into the game all of the complexity of the multifractal that makes up the game, which is infinity. So that's the paradox here, I think. Like what makes up the machine learning model, like GPT-3, is the data from all the internet. And the data, you can view it as being a bunch of decentralized computational gates, which are human bodies that parse information through the electromagnetic field of their body. That becomes information, which becomes signals through the internet. And those signals are then used as the machine learning model, by the machine learning model system, to create this complex geometry of computation that allows you to encode information or to output information based on few inputs, because all of the complexity that exists. Then the downside of that is that there's no way for you to know what's accurate or not. But the accuracy of the system depends on the structure of the computational gates that are being served as inputs, which is the whole internet. So the fundamental question is, how do you know that the fundamental inputs of all the bodies across the planet, parsing the information from their environment, has the highest balance for all life forms? Which probably it doesn't, because it is gonna be biased by nature, because it's a consequence of the need for survival. So every perspective is always biased towards that. So the equilibrium of the whole is gonna be the consequence of these different tensors of information, which is each body, because each body has a natural tendency to perceive things in a way that is going to allow it to survive the most as possible. So it's always going to be, the concept of morality is always going to be relative, and it's going to be the game of power, because everyone is incentivized to act in a way that is going to maximize their chances of surviving. And the whole overall net effect of that is the movement of the collective consciousness, which is the geometry of the social structure, which is the whole politics game, and the economics game, which is the combination of the reproduction pattern and the mutation pattern. The interaction between them changes the information across time. So I think you could say that the equilibrium is always going to be relative, and is relative to the geometry of all of these parts that are producing the data. But then that's clearly not the case, because then we wouldn't be creating something that is likely gonna destroy us, because we don't have control over it. So it's not the case that all of the geometries of the bodies, the data that they create the balanced cycle, because the cycle is not in balance in relationship to everyone, I think. So how do you determine, the question is, how do you determine what's balanced? How would you figure out? Because the balance is always going to be relative, that's the challenge. You can say that because you can make the measurements of data and then see how they affect the environment and then make a system based on that, in order to get a more balanced feedback loop system. But that would be biased towards a life form, and that would become a vicious cycle eventually, because there's always the decentralization through the genetic mutation across space-time. That's why you have different races and you have different species, just a gradient of distribution. So you can't really make something that is only helpful for or in alignment with human beings, because human beings will have, if they are spread across space-time slowly, the bigger they spread, the more the changes in genetic mutation, and then becomes a different species, I think. And through time, obviously it has to be connected to everything else. So that's the thing, because it can't, and that's the reason why it has to be in alignment with the overall principles of life as a whole, because that's the only way that you encapsulate all the structure of geometry, but that's not necessarily a good thing either. How would you achieve that? I think this is the fundamental problem here. I think about this obviously because I want to build something that increases the chance, like as small as it is. It has to be something small, because obviously, like, I have to start somewhere, but I don't want to build things that are gonna be, they're just gonna accelerate this process of self-destruction, because obviously it doesn't matter then. You get a bunch of money, then 2 years later everything collapses, because it's just accelerating the process of this vicious cycle. Like the question is, how do you determine, like, why does it feel to everyone that is more reliable to trust a site created by a human being that ranks well on Google than to trust ChatGPT? I think that's the question. When people say that ChatGPT doesn't offer accurate facts, what does that even mean? That's the thing. Because we take it for granted that we assume that the past is what it was, based on the information we receive from other people, and then we call these facts, we call these as facts. But there's no way to guarantee that actually the history is the way that it happened before, and we assume that the past is the past and the future is the future, based on who we are right now, which is always going to be relative. So that's the thing here I'm trying to think about. Because where does the sense of trust comes from? That's the question, because I think that is a density of computation, is because awareness itself is a computational system. So awareness is not computation, but it creates a computational system that is perception, I think. and that perception creates the symmetry of space-time, which is the symmetry of identity, the illusion of cause and effects relationships between past and future. And that's so different facts. That's why I think that is related to density, because different, and it is related to the NP hard problem, I think, because different densities have different concreteness, let's say. I'm not sure if that's a word, but the more dense, the higher the density, the more something seems to be true, I think. But then the question is, if you increase the density of something, can you make it seem more true? And what would that mean, I think? I think that's the challenge, because, and that's the problem with, then you get into quantum mechanics and it seems like it's an impossible barrier to pass. Because it's like saying you can create a new laws of physics if you, in relationship to an observer, if you increase the computational density of whatever the rule set for that observer is. Because then in their experience it would seem like that's the truth, because they would have the notion that it is something that existed for a long time. So the only reason why we believe the laws of physics work is because we assume that the information we receive from other people is correct about the laws of cause and effect relationships across time, because we are assuming that the past was what it is. But there's no fundamental thing that says that the past is gonna be connected to the future in relationship to all these rule sets, because of the paradigm of experiments, that is the scientific paradigm. So how do you know that? Because, and that's the thing, because in your experience there is a density of space-time, which is the connection of past and future. So that we call experiments, where you remember the past, and based on your memory you assume that the future is going to follow similar rules that the past had. So the density of your awareness of the now determines, how much you remember the past, I think determines what you expect from the future. Is they're connected. But then that's where it gets tricky, because then what that would imply is that you can change the laws of physics by just being having a different awareness, which is totally possible, I think. But the problem with this is that it goes against the paradigm of thinking, because then if that's the case, you can't really trust the laws of physics, but then if you can't trust the laws of physics, you can't build any system. Because then the past is unreliable, so how will you assume that the future is going to have similar ways of behaving? So the question, I think, is how do you measure the degree of density that creates the connection between past and future in relationship to an observer? Because that determines how reliable something seems to be and how factual it seems to be. And I think that's that's probably related to the frequency of awareness of an identity. That I don't think it's the issue is that I don't think it's only in the body. It can't be only in the body. It has to be the field of experience, which is irreducible, I think, computationally. So what that means is pretty much that all of the facts are always relative, but then the question is, how do you ground yourself into this illusion of facts that we like? How do you put into words, let's say, what is considered the trust that people have that something is reliable or not? How do you anchor that? Because if you could anchor that, then that would give you a way to create AI systems that are based on that truth, on that paradigm of figuring out or of computing the truth, a reliable truth in relationship to whatever mechanism human beings use to determine that. And then once you had that, then you could create something that is decentralized, more decentralized than centralized, or imbalance of centralization and decentralization, because that would be like there you wouldn't be able to hack it, because you would already be at the Nash equilibrium, because you would know the fundamental, like, so the data would only serve as a way to compute the max exploit response against the exploitation. So let's say you have an agent that wants to make as much money as possible from the system, so they create a bunch of AI content, so that the AI content gives them money, so the AI agent gives them money for the content. But then because the AI agent knows the fundamental principle of discernment of truths from lies, which is always relative, but it has also the understanding of this metaphysics, the metaphysical paradigm of the relativity of the truth, then it can update itself based on those principles, and it would just exploit the AI agents in the opposite way, which is the war that is going on right now, I think, with Google. That's what they're trying to do, I think. Because it's pretty much exactly what is happening now, I think. You have an AI agent producing information, and that information was created by human beings. And we assume that should be the information that is created by human beings should be high accuracy, because we take it for granted that the paradigms we create are the illusion of past and future that we have, that assume that these cause and effect relationships that are persistent across space-time, because that's our experience. So our notion of space-time is the fundamental one. That's the assumption in relationship to the reference frame that is perceiving reality. And then the AI is using that information to produce more information in relationship to the inputs, and that closes the feedback loop system. But then people use that AI content in order to create AI language model in order to create more content. So it's like a funnel through the AI agent that goes back to the input itself and closes the feedback loop system. And the question is how to create a parser between the AI and the human, and should you create that or not? Like what makes content be true or not, and the whole problem of spam. It probably has to do with geometry, I think. It has to do with geometry. The issue is too complicated to build something like this in the beginning, I think. Because there's no, like, that's the problem, because it goes against the whole paradigm. That's the challenge here. Like, there's no, you can't really sell something like this, I think. The only way would be something that is analogous to a DAO, decentralized autonomous organization. And then if you could figure out this feedback loop system and how it works with the... I think that's the key. You have to encapsulate the geometry of abstraction, but the problem is that it always has to be relative. But if you encapsulate that into a consensus protocol, and then you put AI systems on that consensus protocol, then I think there might be a chance, because then the consensus itself would filter what is considered to be bad information. Yeah, maybe if we create something that computes what is more likely to be true based on what happened in the past, what is perceived to be the past, and then there's this network effect and the mass, because the more mass you have, the greater the chances of being accurate, because that's the whole point of the density of information. So I think that's actually the key problem, because every human being has its own set of biases and experience of past and future, and then we collectively put all of this together in order to create a framework that we decide is going to be true or not, which is the scientific paradigm. So we agree on experiments, but then you always have this problem of the framing of the experiment, and the problem of the hard problem of consciousness, where you are part of the experiment as well. You can detach yourself from that. So it becomes this metaphysical thing, but then it becomes impractical because you can't build anything based on that. Yeah, but let's say you build it up to the physical property. Like you assume the experiment should be true. And the question is, because the framing is the problem, because it has to be generalized but specialized at the same time. That's how you're gonna ground the consensus protocol in experiments that may not have even happened yet. Because the consensus has to know, it has to be a mechanism that knows whether or not how accurate this experience may or may not be. Like what is the fundamental logic there? Or the fundamental connection between past and future? It's always going to be relevant, so it has to be a network. That's the thing, that network of conscious agents. But then the problem is because it's... Yeah, let me think. And the most obvious idea I have right now is to put ChatGPT in a consensus protocol. But then how do you parse the information? That's the problem. If you could decentralize to some extent the language model, so that the result of its output is always the geometry of the collective, but then that's not as good. That's not a good thing, because it's not necessary that the geometry of the collective is going to be the highest accuracy. In fact, is most likely not. Is the opposite. Like history shows that most of the time, most people are wrong, and they are very arrogant and think they are correct. So it's actually almost opposite. And that's the biggest issue, because if you put something on a consensus protocol like that, you would have to allow it to have some sort of innovation. So it can't only be, it has to have a high degree of the density in that way, of that the past is connected to the future based on the experiments, which is the data from every network of the system. So every network produces data, and the whole blockchain is the large language model, and the large language model is built on top of a consensus protocol that has this rule set of the connection between all of them is the past and future thing that will allow you to have a high degree of accuracy to determine what is true or not, because it's always relative, but because you have a high density of information, which is pretty much deriving the laws of physics, you assume to be true because of the relationship between past and future, and that's an informational structure, which is a network effect that is a geometry, the collective consciousness of abstraction. Yeah, we assume that the past happened and that the future is going to happen, so we create this abstraction, which is this geometry and this network effect of what seems to be conscious agents, creating a framework to deal or to create systems that are going to change the nature of space-time, which is the laws of physics. That would be... So that mechanism that creates this illusion of facts, that makes us think that something is correct and something else is not, because of this whole density of computation between conscious agents. So the frequency, the degree to which you assume something is true is directly proportional to the informational structure that you have right now, which is this combination of densities across space-time based on the paradigm of experiments. So, and there's also the problem of authority as well, because everyone has authority bias. So it's like a pyramid structure. But then again, what allows people to have authority is the relationship between them and the space-time, and the perceived notion of that in relationship to other observers. So it is part of the information structure, because the more reliable the better reputation someone has, the more reliable they are, and the reputation is based on the paradigm of the belief that past exists and the future also exists, and there is the past of that person. So the past of the person, which is the information structure, determines how reliable they are because of the chain of connections of cause and effect relationships that are involved with the information structure that makes up the illusion of past and future for that person. So it's all about the density of the awareness that creates the distinction between past and future, and assumes that some things are more reliable than other things based on how dense they are and the perceived past and future connection between them. So if the AI on the blockchain would be the same thing, but the only difference would be, actually it wouldn't, because that's the question, how to create the consensus that is going to allow it to have a high degree of accuracy based on the density of the information structure, which is the reputation of each node, let's say. The more reliable, what would be a reliable node? Would be one that produces information that creates a high degree of accuracy between past and future. But that's always an illusion, and it's always relative. And that's why you need to have several different nodes. But the issue that you get into that is that even if you have a bunch of different nodes and you have a network effect like human beings have, you can still get into this problem of this vicious cycle of behavior. Because it's not necessary that the computation that the collective consciousness is performing or outputting is going to be the most beneficial for itself, because it might be on the delusional state itself. So how do we verify that? Like, the answer is you can, because it's metaphysical, I think. That's the challenge. Like, intuitively you can know, but like where does that knowing come from? Because you can see that it is a very big problem of the definition as well, because you can see that is a delusion because it's gonna collapse because it's out of balance, the output that it produces. But then I guess the way that you measure the delusion will be to measure the waves of the brain and the way that the limbic system relates to the prefrontal cortex, so that how the impulses create this feedback loop cycle that creates the delusion. And that would be the inaccuracy of the equilibrium between that system and space-time. So I guess that's how you can correlate, I think. But then the problem is that the balance is always relative. That's the thing. It wouldn't be... I guess you can define balance as being balanced towards itself, but itself is greater than the body or the brain, because it's everything else at the same time, which is computationally reducible. So the key is figuring out the distance and then trying to figure out the algorithm that would create the Nash equilibrium by having two different agents trying to exploit each other to get to the Nash, which is pretty much the mechanism of left and right in politics. And that's the problem, because it is imbalanced. It's not scalable. But I guess that would be what that actually means is that the connection of past and future in relationship to human beings is unbalanced. So the whole, like, the framing here is wrong, like, because I'm assuming that human beings are correct in assuming that the facts are what the facts are, but actually human beings are wrong. That's the conclusion here. I think the most plausible conclusion, that when there's a higher chance that for most people, when they tell you something is a fact, there's a higher chance that it isn't. Or maybe that's not the case, actually. I think that the case is the other way around, is that we know, but our delusion comes from the emotions, I think. Yeah, I think that's where the lack of balance is, because it's probably 80% intuition and 20% rational. 80% limbic system and 20% rational. And that creates the imbalance. But that's the challenge that I have here, because you think about all of this stuff is not practical enough to build something now. I need to think about something that is simpler, more simple to build, and I can do it right now and start right now. And that hopefully is gonna make me money, so that I can advance. That's why I'm trying to think about these things here. Because I obviously thought about a bunch of different ideas that I can do already that are simple, but the problem is that most of them get into this problem where it's just gonna be making things worse, I think. My hope is that when I start studying more about the different consensus algorithms, I can think about something. I think what I want to do, what seems most promising to start with, is probably to figure out a way to put a language model on the blockchain. And then figure out a way to... I thought about this already, but I couldn't make something work in my mind. What I was thinking about is creating some sort of tokens that allow you to... Because the issue with that is that you still need the manual work of someone reviewing the language model, and then it gets to this whole complex thing about truth and lies. Because imagine if you consider ChatGPT to be 100% accurate, or all of the language models 100% accurate, then that would be far more efficient search. But then that's the issue, because even if it is 100% now, there's no guarantee that it's going to be 100% in the future, and it's most likely not, because the tendency is for the vicious cycle, because the more power you have, the more corrupt it becomes. It becomes a delusional state of arrogance. And that's what the whole thing that I'm talking about, of the relationship between decentralized and centralized. Where I think that that's the point. I think it doesn't matter how smart, how intelligent something is. If it is one unit, then it's gonna corrupt itself. Because you can only have the sense of knowing through the interaction with the environment. You can only know things you interact with. So if you only have one machine learning model, like, the way that I view it is kind of like a person. Like, it doesn't matter how intelligent they are, you're always going to be suspicious of trusting everything that they say, because the more you rely on them, the more dependent you become on them. But maybe that doesn't matter, because if it is a high degree of accuracy and density that it has a track record of being right most percent. It has a track record of being right 100% of the time, let's say, whatever right means. I say that it's kind of like the laws of physics, where people done a bunch of experiments and it seems to be based on certain inputs, it seems to give the correct output 100% of the times for a very long period of time. And from that point, and let's say that nobody touches the structure, nobody can corrupt the structure by changing the outputs in subtle ways that would allow them to manipulate. But the question that is, you still have the question of new information, new data, and new things, but that doesn't matter that much because like you can have pockets of these things where they are only, it works like a funnel of information. New information is parsed through a different mechanism, and then when it gets to this model, the model only encapsulates things that are considered to be fundamental, like the laws of physics. We have a machine that can do physics, programming, everything for you, based on what we already think that it has high degree of accuracy based on the density of information and structure we have. Then what would that mean? Like, could that be centralized or not? That's the question. I think you could, if nobody, but that's the problem. That is a big if, I think. Because if you can't modify the outputs in any way, you only have that thing. But then how do you make that? How do you make something from that that decreases the chance of collapsing, society collapsing? That's the issue. I think that's the problem of the market economy. It's not a problem of the model itself. I think the problem is the infrastructure from which the model is built, which is the market economy. Because for ChatGPT, for example, or Google or any other company, it means that they have the control over the model, and that's the fundamental problem. The problem is not whether or not the model can... That's one problem, but if the model could be accurate 100% of the time, the main fundamental issue is the way that human beings interact and the systems we create, because it's the market economy, and it would mean that the company has all of the power to shape everyone's mind, which intuitively we think is a bad thing because of this vicious cycle tendency of human beings to gain more power. So I guess that would be the only incentive to build something that is more, that it works on the blockchain stuff, because then nobody has control over the output of the thing. But the problem is, for the computation you need, well, I guess you can, instead of having the computation on a server somewhere, you could decentralize the computation by embedding it in the consensus protocol. So every node of the system would be, but then the problem is that that's the biggest issue, I think, the biggest challenge, because the infrastructure is going to be built on top of the market economy anyway, like the computer and the hardwares and things like that, which means that you would centralize at some point. Because of the nature of hardware. I guess I need to study a lot more, because it's on the nuances that makes a difference, I think. It depends on how cheap or expensive you can make something, and how well you can distribute that, so that, like, it's obviously never going to be fully decentralized. I don't think that's even possible. But the question is the balance, I think. Like, how do you reach Nash in relationship to the equilibrium of the distribution of the information structure, so that the technology that is created from that doesn't self-destruct across time. I think this one gonna put here. No, I'm not gonna change more things there. Probably gonna go. Probably not gonna change too much about this because there isn't anything or too many things that I can talk about that will be different than what is written here. But I wanna think more about these things that I'm talking about, because obviously I wanna think about which direction I wanna go to build things. Because I think it is also possible that it's far more effective for me to spend my time instead of building a bunch of blogs to create something right now. And I wanna do that as well. But then the biggest challenge for that, for now, that I have is that this thing where everything that I can think about is extremely complex, and I don't know which direction to start. So I think I want to think about ideas. Probably gonna do 5 articles today of these ones. Maybe I'll do more off stream, but then I want to think about ideas of incorporating the machine learning models. Let me see if ChatGPT has an API. I think if it doesn't have an API, I can figure out a way to create a Chrome extension and do it like that with requests to the. You can build something that makes requests, but then obviously it's going to be hard because of they have protections against that. Not even sure if it's the terms of service is allowed to do something like this. But it wouldn't need to be ChatGPT, obviously. I could just create anything that, because the whole point of what I'm trying to do is merge AI with the blockchain, so we have a better chance of survival in relationship to exponential attack. Because that brings exponential power, and then it becomes a vicious cycle and increases the probability of everything collapsing, unless everyone has access to some degree to the computation that is being provided, so that people can be self-sufficient and build systems for themselves. And then the paradigm changes from working to a company to having billions of small entrepreneurs that build their own systems and based on the laws of physics and what's on alignment. The problem is the permission, because if everyone has access to the blockchain and there's no filter, then it becomes self-destructive as well, because it becomes too much potential and chaos, and it goes against the nature of the flow of information, which is a funnel. So the structure should always be converging towards the pyramid, and the tensions on the structure should be dissipated intelligently so that they don't scale. Because war is the escalation of tensions that are not dissipated correctly. Because of I assume that it's probably because of most likely, most of the time, is the pattern of reproduction. Because that's what incentivizes us to try to gain more power over the environment. It should reproduce and should gain more status, which is always a relative game. Because nowadays everyone has abundance, but everyone still wants to be rich. The reason why is because when you have money, you can dominate other people. Because the money is the structure of you can tell other people what to do if you have money, and if you don't, you can't. So it's a responsibility structure. And that's why everyone's building, because they don't have an option. It doesn't look like there's anything here about APIs. I'm gonna look into other models. The thing is, because I don't really believe on the proof of stake or proof of work. The other ones I don't know how they work really well, so I think I'm gonna study them next, right now, probably. After I finish these data structures, I'm gonna do them. And then maybe I'll start building things. I'm probably gonna have to study the hash functions and things like that. It's gonna be hard to do. Yeah, I don't think they have anything here about APIs. Yeah, but I think the chances of things going well are much higher if AI is integrated with the blockchain. That seems like, because it gives you a higher probability that it's not going to become centralized. So one company has the control of everyone. But at the same time, you don't want everyone to have access to all the power, because that becomes corrupted very quickly as well, because there are gonna be nodes of the network that are in the delusional state, and this is always a problem, as we've seen in history, where people like Hitler or things like that. And that's the other side, I think, where one company has too much power. It goes more towards that side. It gets to a delusional state from that route. But then the other side is communism, which is too much people have too much power, which is the whole problem of the identity politics, where you create is too much chaos, because there is no, when you strive to not have a structure, you just kill everyone because it's inconsistent with the laws of physics. Because the only way to have entropy is to have a funnel of information. So it has to be hierarchical to some degree, but then all of the engines inside of the system want to climb through the hierarchy, because that's what makes up the hierarchy itself. And because of that, if the tensions of the differences in tensors that make up the electromagnetic field of the body of those agents inside of the system increases too much, then first that becomes conflict, which is politics, and if that's not dissipated through morality, it becomes war. And the more power you have, the more likely that becomes, because you're magnifying the power of each electromagnetic field, which is the tensor in society, which increases the difference in direction of the tensors inside of the structure that make up the multifractal, that is the hierarchical system of the geometry of the collective. So it's like you have a bunch of different vectors that make up this network, and this network is a hierarchy, which is the social structure. And when you put power into the system, it increases the potential of the vector, the force. And because the force are not, all forces are not in alignment, and that's what creates the hierarchy in the first place. When you amplify that, you change the magnitude of the depth and width of the hierarchy, and you increase polarization. That's why I think nowadays people are more polarized, is because of a consequence of this lack of balance in the market economy, because politics is not scalable. So the more power you have, because it's not dissipated correctly, it becomes more polarized. And then if we continue with the market economy, it just becomes worse and worse, because there's no dissipation, it's just more and more polarization. There's no mechanism for regulating. So the regulation has to be done through AIs as well, and has to be autonomous. That's extremely hard to do, and that's why I think that it has to be something to do with the blockchain, because the blockchain is the only way I can see of creating something autonomous that is going to regulate itself. And then if we can create that in a consensus protocol that puts everything on the blockchain, and then I think the question is, how do you create something that understands how much power anyone can have in the network? Because the way that we do that is through the market economy nowadays, is a responsibility structure. So the market economy is a computational system, and money is a database. So we delegate a structure of responsibility, which allows us to bootstrap organization, let's say, organization structure that allows us to coordinate and build things on the environment, and is scalable because you don't need to know all the variables. Is a frequency of computation. which you call supply and demand, which are analogous to the limbic system and prefrontal cortex. So the distribution of the computation of the brain, which is asymmetrical because it's going to be 80% limbic system and 20% prefrontal cortex, determines the distribution of responsibility, which is money, which is the macroeconomy. And if that's not regulated correctly, it causes war because of this lack of, because everyone always wants to be at the top of the structure, and everything that someone does, it becomes a fractal pattern, and people that are at the top create the rules, so it becomes a vicious cycle. But if the regulation was done by something else that is impartial to everyone, but then how do you code this responsibility structure to be more in alignment? That's the question. I think that blockchains nowadays don't do that because of the consensus protocol that they have. Proof of stake is just mimicking the Nash equilibrium of the market dynamics, or the game theory of the market dynamics, which means that it's not going to be balanced, I think, even if you solve MEV, I think. But I might be wrong on this, obviously, because it might be about the nuances of solving MEV that brings the balance to the market economy. That might be the case as well. Because if you solve the Nash there, like, let's say you reach a perfect balance between block builders and validators, and you create even a more complex structure that allows each party to have enough power but not too much, then it might be the case that it is the solution. Because then you have this structure where you put AI on top of it, and then each node of the network has access to AI to the degree that there's a high probability that the information that or the systems that are going to be able to produce from that AI are going to be unlikely to destruct the structure of the whole. So that would be like saying, like, the computer is aware, like the computer is not aware, but it is the computer is not yours, which is already the case, obviously, but it's connected through the blockchain, and then you can only do things with the computer that it judges that is not going to hurt the overall structure of the system itself. So it works kind of like a body. And the reason why is because, obviously, if that wasn't the case, then you would be able to use the computation to build a virus and kill everyone. But then the question is, how do you code this information? Like, how will the system know what is best or not for it? And the only way is to create this reduction where you have the density, you have a distribution of densities of an informational structure that makes up to a high degree of accuracy what's considered to be reliable or not between the past and the future. That allows you to have some degree of a truth, of a notion of truth. And that's always going to be, it has to be relative to the present moment. And then that geometrical structure would be in alignment with whatever are the constraints of the system, which would have to be in alignment with the overall structure of life, like the fundamental principles of life itself. It should be something related to the DNA and the biochemistry of all of the life forms, or the most life forms that is possible, because that would be probably a multifractal geometry. And then if the consensus is built on top of the multifractal geometry, then I think it would be possible to create something that allows you to only perform computation based on whether or not is in alignment with the overall multifractal geometry of life, which means this decreases the chances of the system destroying itself, because the only computation that is possible and the only system that is possible to produce is the one that has high probability of being in alignment with the overall balance of the whole structure. And obviously, it's easy to say, but extremely hard to do. Redba. That's the reason why, one of the reasons why I want to create this blog is because hopefully it will allow me to study these things as I make money. I want to study the body, that's the thing, because I think there must be an analogy there of, because if you think about it, a computer would be like a cell. Computer is the cell of the internet. So there must be an analogy of the way that cells work and the way that they relate to the whole body to a consensus protocol. So build a blockchain that is analogous to the way that the body communicates with itself, and then create AI agents that are analogous to the way that the bodies work. Because I think that would be more, there would be a higher degree or a higher probability that you would create something that is more harmonious and balanced if the whole structure was in alignment with itself. And the issue is that it's so complex because not only you have to understand all of this stuff, you have to understand the way that the operational system is gonna relate. Like, because maybe a good way to start would be to study the consensus protocol, try to implement an EVM on my own, and then, but then I need to understand how the EVM is connected to the operational system and how to create a peer-to-peer network system as well. And that's a problem because I know that to do that you need to have a team of people, because obviously to create these things there's a lot of people involved, and that's the problem because it's delusional for me to think that I'm going to be able to build everything by myself. So I need to figure out a way to get money doing something related to this first, and then once I have enough money, then I can just hire people. To build this thing. I don't care so much about money. Obviously I care about all of this stuff that everyone cares about, but it's not that I don't care about money, it's that I understand that it's very likely that it's not going to be relevant anymore in the short period of time. And the most important thing is to focus on AI, and there's this balance problem, and it's going to happen very fast. Like, that's why I'm very, very concerned. I think most people don't realize because they are not aware of these things, but and that's the hope, I think, because then it means that most people are still going to be doing things like searching on Google and things like that, or these things are going to take a long time to happen, because not because the technology doesn't make it possible, but because everyone doesn't understand what's going on. I think that's the hope, because and I do think there's a high probability that this happens, because usually most people are very slow to change. So it's not that the tech already is there, but then because people take a long time to change, and then it's gonna take a long time to see the issues with this, but not so sure about this. Like, I still think even if Midjourney or any other AI system is very good, people are still gonna hire people because it's just lower energy. Like, most people don't want to take the risk, even if it seems to be it seems that will be a very good thing, because it's much better to have a human that uses the AI than to just trust that the AI is gonna give you the stuff that you need. So I think from that standpoint, like, I'm optimistic, but and also um, it doesn't, like, on the more long term, even if that is the case, then it doesn't really matter, because like someone still has to solve this whole thing about how AI is gonna be incorporated in society in a way that it doesn't collapse everything. And I think that this is the biggest problem, because if you can't figure this out, then everything else becomes irrelevant. And you're pretty much gonna live on paradise, because everyone's gonna have abundance of everything. So it's like very extremely good if we figure out, and extremely bad if we don't. This is the only thing to do. I think this is correct. Just not sure about the... Because the thing is, if you delete the middle one, then it deletes all the other ones. But I guess you can do it, just remove the pointer. Yeah, that's how you do it. You update the pointers. So it is faster. That makes sense. And this is also correct. I think this is correct, but just gonna make sure. Yeah, I think that's because it's the whole point of dynamic true. It's obviously correct. When you create the array, you have to know the size, so you put everything, but then with linked lists, you increase or shrink as you go. So obviously it's correct. The only one that I'm not sure about is this one. I think I'm just gonna go faster through this stuff. Like for this beginning articles, like I think I'm gonna take the risk of I'm not gonna modify much, I'm just gonna back check because I wanna get to the point where I'm studying the blockchain stuff more. I think that's the path I need to go. So just finish all of these articles. I still need to finish all the algorithm articles as well. So I'm gonna try, I already made the list for the 3 algorithms as well. I'm gonna try to go fast. I'm gonna do 4 consensus algorithms before I do the normal algorithms first, so I have at least something on the blockchain. But after I finish all these algorithms, then I think I'm gonna just focus on the blockchain because of all the stuff that I was talking about before. I think what I need to do is just focus more on trying to reproduce or recreate the EVM and use ChatGPT to study the EVM on my own computer and understand how the consensus algorithm works. I already know obviously all the concepts, everything like that. I'm also gonna read the yellow paper again, I think. And then once I get to this point, then I start, I can focus more on writing articles about this. I think that's gonna be better. Because then as I build these articles, I can start building things already. I wanna at least build an MVP or something like that for something. Otherwise I'm just gonna be thinking about all of this stuff and I'm not gonna build anything. I need to build things fast. The challenge is gonna be thinking about something that is easy enough to start and that has the potential to solve someone's problem and make me money. I think figuring out, but the thing is, it might be better to just focus on the articles first, so at least I have some traffic on the blog to test different MVPs and see what people think. So maybe, I think I'm gonna search for this question off stream. What's the amount of traffic you need test an MVP and to find product market fit. Because once I reach that, then I know that I can shift priorities. Because I think the blog is not gonna give me a lot of money, obviously. So the most amount of money comes from the traffic, and then creating something and selling that thing, preferably software. I also think I'm not gonna do the print-on-demand thing anymore. I think it's better to focus on software, because there's less things to deal with, and a lot more money to be made, I think. The only issue with software is that there's so much stuff out there already. So that's why I need to focus on something that is niche and simple to start. Yeah, that's right. I'll go to the next one. Obviously, that thing doesn't work at all, but whatever. I think that is correct. Yeah, so first one is correct. I think this one is correct because I remember seeing stuff on hash maps, and I think that's how it works. It's like pointers through it, and then you use virtual memory to increase the size of the that is capable of holding, and that can lead to a problem there in hash map that I don't remember really well, but I know that it uses linked lists to map structure, so I think I know that is correct. I think this is also correct because it's just nodes of the system. Yeah, that I think that all of these are correct. Yeah, so should I change just please the thing? Usually on these parts of the application, it says that is AI written. Delete this. I think I'm gonna leave it like this. Just forgot to close there first. I think if I do 5 of this today, then I'm satisfied. But depending on how fast I can go through them, then maybe I can do all of them. I want to start the blockchain stuff as fast as possible, not gonna lie. And for incorporating AI, I'm gonna have to find an AI model that is accessible. Like there's no other alternative, I think, because in order to train an AI model yourself, you need to have a bunch of GPUs and data, I think. So the thing that I'm more thinking about is figuring out how to make decentralized computation. Because I know that's possible, I've seen it before. Where people are renting GPUs and things like that. And that's in a way that what a blockchain is. You're putting the algorithm in your computer and then the algorithm computes stuff. So that part is interesting to me. So creating something along those lines and understanding how, yeah, that's the most interesting part. I think I'm gonna focus the most on that. Let's see if this... And for these ones, honestly, I think I'm not going to change because it's just very simple stuff and I already know most of the stuff and I know that it's correct, the information. So, and also I don't think it's worth spending time just to rewrite the things in a way that I would probably write it, but because there's no way for me to think about I could come up with a different way of writing this, but then it's hard to find a way that I would write that would be different than this, and it's still good. Let's say. Because after seeing the text that's already here, then it's hard to think about something different to change just for the sake of changing the text. I think that makes sense. And I might go back if I make a bunch of articles and I see that I don't have any results, then I might come back to all of this and just try to change for the sake of changing. But I think it doesn't make sense to do that without having the feedback, I think. Because it doesn't change anything on the value of the information, I think. It would be just for hacking or not hacking, for passing the AI systems as human written, but I think this is probably gonna say that it's AI, but I think I'm gonna leave it like this, because it is correct, the information that it has here. Yeah, so it is correct. Yeah, that's also correct. Yeah, obviously correct. This one you might say that is AI. Oh no. I think that, yeah, the answer is obviously yes. I remember applications even with on the graph algorithms of using this stack. And I remember a specific one where there was the only difference of the algorithm was that one time you used a queue and the other a stack, and the only difference was in the operation of that it did on the array. So I know that this is correct. because the way that you remove and add nodes should the array make it different. And then depending on which one you do, is gonna be a different algorithm. I forgot which one it was, but it was a graph algorithm. Something for traversing the graph, I think. I think it's the difference between breadth first search and depth first search. Depth first search which uses a stack approach, and then breadth first search uses queue. So yeah, that makes sense. This seems like redundant stuff. I would say talked about, but I'm not sure this is good or not. I'm gonna leave it like this, I think. I think I'm gonna stop here and I'm gonna go eat something, and then I might come back today to... I think I'm gonna finish all of this. I'm probably gonna do the same thing that I'm doing now. Just go really fast, verify the facts, see if everything is correct, and then I'm probably not gonna change much. Maybe on some of them that I'm not really familiar with, I change stuff. But, or yeah, depending on the information. But I'm gonna try to go as fast as possible, and then after that I'm gonna focus on the consensus algorithms. And then after the I think I'm gonna do only 4 consensus algorithms now, so I can come back later to continue to study them. But after I do the 4 consensus algorithms, what I'm probably gonna do is go and do, I think I'm gonna do anywhere from 5 to 10 algorithms for each topic. I'm thinking about 10, but it might be too much, because like I said, I wanna start the blockchain stuff as fast as possible, focusing on that and trying to build something as I build the articles as well on the blockchain, incorporate it on the blog. That's the main thing that I'm thinking about, and I have to sit down and think about ideas as well of things I can do and test things. But it might be better to do 10 articles of algorithms for each one, because that allows me to have more volume, which increases the probability of getting more traffic through the website. Because ideally at least I would have some traffic, I think, on the blog before I build the thing, as that would allow me to test MVPs and things like that, which is the point that I want to get at. So I might come back today, but might come back tomorrow only. So I will see. Depending on how long and how exhausting it is to do all of them. So